There is a bowl of lemons sitting on the counter at most houses I visit. A few look fine. A few are going soft. One or two have already gone to mold. By the end of the week, most of them get squeezed in a hurry before they are completely lost. Not because anyone wanted lemon juice that particular morning, but because it was use them now or throw them away. This is how most people live with lemons, and it is not how it has to be. I keep lemons for a full year. Not in any special appliance, not in a vacuum-sealed container from the kitchen store. I keep them the way this farmhouse kept them for generations before refrigeration existed, and what I end up with at the end of the process is more useful in most applications than the fresh lemon I started with. Not preserved in the sense of compromised or diminished. Transformed. Better for certain things than the raw fruit ever was. I am Levi Yoder. I was raised plain here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and the kitchen I grew up in ran without waste as a matter of plain principle. When lemons came into that kitchen, they did not leave as trash. My grandmother put every lemon to a purpose, some immediate and some months out, and the pantry shelf held preserved lemons from October through the following September, without a gap. I am going to show you how she did it, and why what comes out of that process is worth understanding as an ingredient in its own right, not just a way to save something from the bin. Before I show you, let me say this plainly. If you want the full collection of the old homestead methods that were handed down in our family, from the garden and orchard to the pantry, cellar, and the everyday keeping of a house, I have gathered them into one simple ebook. You will find it in the description below. Now, let us get back to the topic. Here is the simplest method first, the one that extends a fresh lemon's life by several weeks with almost no effort at all. A lemon left on the counter lasts about a week before the skin softens and the interior begins to dry. A lemon sealed individually in a small zip bag and placed in the refrigerator lasts 4 to 6 weeks without significant deterioration. The cold slows the breakdown of the rind, and the sealed bag stops the lemon from losing moisture into dry refrigerator air. A refrigerated lemon without the bag goes leathery and tight before it molds, because the cold, dry air pulls the moisture right out of it. The bag is the difference, and a small one costs you nothing you do not already have. Most households already know some version of this. It works well for a few weeks, but it is not where the real keeping lives. For lemons you want to keep after cutting, the same principle applies with one addition. Press plastic wrap directly against the cut face before refrigerating, the same way you would protect an avocado. The cut surface dries and oxidizes quickly in cold, dry air. The wrap keeps that face almost exactly as it was when you cut it. A lemon half stored this way holds for a week to 10 days. Now the method that keeps lemons for a full year and produces something genuinely and categorically different from a fresh lemon. Preserved lemons. Salt cured in their own juice, packed in a jar, left alone for a month before they are ready, and useful for a year and more after that. This is one of the oldest preservation methods for citrus that exists. It requires nothing beyond the lemons, coarse salt, a clean glass jar, and time. Here is the method precisely. Take organic lemons if you can find them, because you will be eating the rind and you want rind that has not been treated. Wash them thoroughly. For each lemon, cut it almost all the way through into quarters from the stem end, stopping before you cut through the base so the lemon holds together as one piece. Pack a generous amount of coarse salt into the cuts, roughly a tablespoon per lemon, pressing it into the exposed flesh. Pack the salted lemons tightly into a clean glass jar and press them down firmly so the juice begins to release. Add 2 more tablespoons of coarse salt over the top. Seal the jar and leave it at room temperature for 3 to 4 days. Turn it upside down and leave it another 3 days. By then the lemons should have released enough juice to be fully submerged. If they are not, squeeze fresh lemon juice into the jar until they are covered. Seal it again and move it to a cool, dark spot. Leave it alone for at least 4 weeks before you open it. The salt and the acid together preserve the contents completely. Once opened, the jar keeps in the refrigerator for up to a year. What you have after 4 weeks is something that shares a name with a fresh lemon, but is a genuinely different ingredient. The bitterness of the rind disappears. The pith, the white layer beneath the yellow skin that is so aggressively bitter when fresh that most people cut it away and discard it, softens completely during the cure and loses its harsh edge entirely. Together, the rind and pith take on a complex, intensely lemony, mellow, and slightly fermented depth that no amount of fresh lemon can produce. I think of it the way I think of the difference between a raw tomato and a slow-roasted one. Same origin, transformed by time and process into something with more depth and less sharpness. Preserved lemon rind, rinsed briefly before use to clear the surface salt, adds something to roasted chicken, to braised greens, to vinaigrettes, to grain dishes, and to sauces that fresh lemon simply does not have. It is not a substitute for the fresh fruit. It is a different ingredient that does different work, and once you have cooked with it once, you will keep a jar going from that point on. My grandmother made preserved lemons in the autumn when the market had its best citrus, and by December, the jars were ready and carried the household through the winter and the following summer without any attention beyond keeping the contents submerged. She used the rind in 3 distinct ways. The first was minced fine into stuffings, braised dishes, and grain preparations, where it cooked through the dish and flavored the whole without any visible piece remaining. The second was sliced thin and used as a layered ingredient in sandwiches or salads where the piece itself was meant to be encountered and tasted. The third was dried further after the curing was complete, sliced thin and laid on a cloth in a warm spot until papery, then stored in a small jar as a dried condiment to crumble over dishes the way you would crumble a dried herb. 3 different relationships between the preserved lemon and the food it goes into. She also did not discard the brine left in the jar. And I want to be clear about this because most people empty a jar of preserved lemons and pour the liquid straight down the drain. That liquid is lemon juice fermented with salt over months. It carries the concentrated flavor of the rind and the flesh that cured in it. A tablespoon in a vinaigrette does what salt, acid, and citrus all do at once. A tablespoon in a braising liquid or over-roasted vegetables before they go in the oven is months of slow flavor development working in your favor. Do not ever pour it out. Now the third method, the one that keeps lemons the longest and takes the least space of the 3. Before any lemon leaves your kitchen toward the bin, zest it over a piece of parchment paper. Use a fine grater and take only the yellow skin, not the white pith beneath it. Spread the zest in a thin, even layer on the parchment. Let it sit at room temperature for an hour until slightly dry to the touch. Then fold the parchment into a small flat envelope and place it in the freezer. Frozen lemon zest holds its full flavor and its volatile oils for a year. You break off exactly the amount a recipe needs and return the rest to the freezer. The zest from every lemon you squeeze for juice and were about to discard lives in the freezer and arrives in a cake or a sauce or a marinade 12 months later, as sharp and bright and fragrant as the day you grated it off the skin. Think about what leaves most kitchens alongside the lemon. The brine poured down the drain when the jar is empty, because it looks like liquid waste rather than a flavoring agent. The zest scraped into the compost before the squeezed half follows it in. The lemons on the counter that went soft through the week before anyone got to them. Each of those things had more to give and was not asked to give it. That is not a failure of care. It is a failure of information, and the grocery store has absolutely no interest in supplying that information because the replacement is where the income lives. There is simply no profit in teaching you to use a lemon 3 times and replace it less often. The store does not lose anything when you lose the lemon. You do, quietly, every week, a little at a time. My grandmother did not think of what she kept in those jars as preservation in any deliberate or elevated sense. She did not have a word for it, and she did not need one. She thought of it as using the lemon completely rather than partially, the same way she used everything else in that kitchen. The fresh juice was the first use. The rind, whether preserved or dried or minced into a dish, was the second. The brine the jar developed over months of sitting in the dark was the third. 3 things from one fruit that most people extract one thing from and then discard the rest. I do not think this is because people are careless. I think it is because no one ever showed them what the lemon had left to give after the juice was gone. My grandmother knew because someone showed her. I am showing you now. The difference between a kitchen that runs without waste and one that produces a softening bowl of lemons every week comes down to this: knowing what the full use of a thing is before you decide you are done with it. Tell me in the comments whether you have made preserved lemons before, or whether this is something you are planning to start this coming week. And tell me your county and your state while you are there. I read every single one, and I am always glad to know who is out there keeping food the right way. Next time I am going to show you how my grandmother kept garlic from the summer harvest in perfect condition all the way through the following spring, the specific preparation and storage conditions that kept every single bulb firm and tight, while the same garlic bought at the store in January is already sprouting and going soft. A working kitchen keeps its own garlic through the winter without much effort at all, and it is not difficult once you understand what the garlic actually needs to stay alive. The people who built this country with their own two hands knew things we are only just now starting to truly remember.